Hello, and welcome to Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici's webinar on the resources that are available to protect families and individuals during the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for joining us. Congresswoman Bonamici will take your questions beginning in just a few minutes. She will be joined by Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and the Oregon Law Center attorneys Mike Pianowski and Catherine McNeil. If you would like to ask a question during the Q&A section, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen while logged into Zoom. All lines will be muted until the question and answer section. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Congresswoman Bonamici knows that many Oregonians are struggling due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The recently passed CARES Act created new rights and protections for renters, provided direct payments to individuals, and other supports. Additionally, many resources exist to help consumers, domestic violence survivors, and others who are struggling during this time. To help explain these protections and to answer your questions, she has invited Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and Oregon Law Center attorneys Mike Pianowski and Catherine McNeil. Attorney General Rosenblum was first elected to a 4-year term as Oregon's 17th Attorney General in November 2012 and was re-elected to a second term November 8, 2016. Her priorities include consumer protection and civil rights, advocating for and protecting Oregon's children, seniors, immigrants, and crime victims, and those saddled with education-related debt. The Oregon Law Center is a nonprofit organization that provides free legal help to people struggling to make ends meet on matters related to their homes, livelihoods, medical care, and physical safety against domestic violence. Mike is a staff attorney at the Oregon Law Center Hillsborough Regional Office. He came to Oregon from Arizona in 1997 for law school and didn't want to leave. His work at OLC focuses on residential tenant housing issues and foreclosure prevention for homeowners. Catherine McNeil is a supervising attorney at the Oregon Law Center Hillsborough Regional Office. Her practice at OLC focuses on protecting the rights of clients with disabilities and immigrant families in the context of administrative law, employment, and education. If you've just joined us, welcome to Congresswoman Bonamici's webinar about the resources that are available to protect families and individuals during the coronavirus pandemic. If you would like to ask a question during the question and answer section, please type into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now we'll go ahead and get started. Here is Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici.
Thank you so much, Allie, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today. We had a great response, and I think it's reflective of the needs in our community. Thank you, Allie, and my other staff members who are working so hard remotely, sometimes I think around the clock, to hear from our constituents and to share their needs and concerns. I want to welcome Oregon's Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum. Thank you, Attorney General Rosenblum, for taking the time to join us today. I know you have been working tirelessly to protect Oregonians during the pandemic, and we're grateful for your leadership. And I also want to welcome Mike Pianowski and Catherine McNeil from the Oregon Law Center. Thank you both for joining us today. I started my legal career at Lane County Legal Aid, and I know firsthand how important Oregon Law Center's work is to our community here in Northwest Oregon, but around the state. And finally, thank you to everyone who is joining us today. Please consider all of us, my office, the Attorney General's office, and Oregon Law Center as resources for you and your families as we navigate this crisis together. This global pandemic has upended lives. It's created an unprecedented health and economic crisis. And my thoughts are with the Oregonians and people around the country and around the world who have contracted the virus. My heart goes out to families who have lost a loved one. And as the crisis continues to unfold, many people, through no fault of their own, are finding themselves suddenly unemployed, navigating school and childcare closures, and worried about putting food on the table and making their rent or mortgage payments, and they're looking for help. Congress passed the CARES Act at the end of March to help by providing direct economic payments of up to $1,200 to most individuals, but not all. an extension and expansion of unemployment benefits, and a suspension of federal student loan repayments for most, but not all, student loan borrowers. The law also suspends certain mortgage payments and evictions, and provides nearly $2 billion to support public housing agencies to help keep families in stable housing during the pandemic. And it provides more than $4 billion in emergency funding to address homelessness. But we know it's not enough and more needs to be done. As Congress turns to the next relief package, I am continuing to fight for consumer protections that will support people during this pandemic. I introduced legislation, the Scam Debt Act, to protect consumers from predatory debt collection practices. And I'm going to give some recognition to Allison and Andrew in my Washington, D.C. office for helping not only with that legislation, but with this event today. And I'll continue pushing for comprehensive consumer protections in upcoming bills. I've led the fight in calling on the administration to stop unlawful wage garnishment and to make sure that people receive their full economic stimulus check. I know, as many of you recognize already, the one-time payment is not enough. I've joined my colleagues, Representative Ro Khanna and Tim Ryan, in advocating for ongoing payments during the pandemic of at least $2,000 a month. The housing crisis was affecting Oregonians long before coronavirus arrived, and housing inequities are now more pronounced than ever. I support the Emergency Rental Assistance and Rental Market Stability Act. That will provide $100 billion for emergency rental assistance programs. And I will continue to fight for housing policies that will support all Oregonians. Our federal efforts cannot work without the partnership of our leaders here in Oregon, and there are no better partners than our Attorney General and Oregon Law Center. Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum has always been committed to protecting and supporting consumers, and during this crisis, she's continued to fight for the rights of Oregonians. And our colleagues at the Oregon Law Center have continued to provide their advocacy and legal expertise for people who need it most. And I thank all of you for being here, and I'll turn it over to Attorney General Rosenblum for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I want to make sure I can be heard, first of all. Yes? Okay, very good. Well, it is an honor to be with you and to have been invited to join you, Representative Bonamici, and to the Oregon Law Center. We work together. Sometimes we're on opposing sides, but we're always looking out for consumers and for the best interests of Oregonians. So today I'll be mostly discussing the Oregon Department of Justice's response to COVID-19 related to consumer protection issues. And you know, the impact of COVID-19 has brought out, unfortunately, sometimes the worst, but mostly the best in people in Oregon and in our country. But the scammers, they are out in droves, and it just seems like they have dollar signs in their blood. They are lurking in the corners anytime there's some sort of a crisis, a catastrophe, whether it be an act of God or something like this, which of course we couldn't have anticipated, but they're always waiting to take advantage of people. So unfortunately that's happening. So whether it is a knock on the door, which since we're home, we have to make sure we know who's knocking on the door, right, for lots of reasons, for our own safety, but that includes our financial safety, or whether it's a phone call. We have a Just Hang Up campaign because we try to teach our seniors in particular, who are sometimes more frequently at home than we are, maybe a little bit lonely, maybe excited when the phone rings, but a lot of times that phone call is a scammer, someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart. And then of course, online, we're all online. How many of you are online most of the day now, whether it's for work or other purposes, shopping, you name it. And when you're online, you must be so careful about not clicking onto phishing emails or just simply links that will lead you down, unfortunately, a not rosy path to malware and to giving up not only potentially your money if you're asked for, and hopefully you will not ever give cash or wire money to anybody unless it's absolutely your closest family or friends, make sure it is in fact them. But it's also just other kinds of financial scamming that goes on whether it's money or whether it's your identity, whether it's your personal information that can be so easily obtained unwittingly from you. So here's what we've done. We've issued since March 9th, so just 2 months ago, almost exactly, we've issued 5 scam alerts on COVID-19 related scams. And you can find these at oregonconsumer.gov. You can also sign up for our scam alerts at oregonconsumer.gov/COVID-19, or just simply our general scam alert. So please feel free to do that. Our website, we hope, will be easy for you to navigate. On March 16th, I asked Governor Brown to declare an abnormal disruption of the market. That's just basically fancy term for saying, hey, there's potentially price gouging going on, and we need to make sure that our price gouging statute goes into effect. It's one of these kind of dormant statutes that you have to get the governor to issue a proclamation in order for it to go into effect. And she did that immediately upon our request. And we've had something like 800 calls to our new price gouging hotline. So please, if you do feel like you're being charged something that's exorbitant, it's still in effect, and we want to make sure that that is not the case for any type of essential consumer good. And as we know today, an essential good can be something as simple as a hand sanitizer, right? A bottle of something to keep your hands clean, or face masks, or whatever it might be. Please let us know if you feel that you are a victim of price gouging. And then, of course, all these other scams, it would take me all day to go through all of them. So I know, Congresswoman, we don't have time for that. But we can make sure that you're aware of all of the scams that are out there. I'm also working to share information. This is, I know, very close to your heart, Congresswoman, about education-related debt and repayment during the crisis. And we will be adding some information, some good news, important information for borrowers who owe education-related debt onto our website as well. I know I've talked a lot about financial issues related to COVID-19, but we're also very concerned about the rise in bias incidents and hate crimes. And so I just wanted to mention that during this crisis, we also have a hotline now. We're responsible for the hate crimes and bias incidents statewide hotline. And our office has received already 32 reports of bias incidents and hate crimes related specifically to COVID-19. 15 of those were national origin or race-based, targeting of Asian Americans or Asian Pacific Islanders. We just aren't going to tolerate that here in our state. So we've actually issued a call to action, which we would very much like you to sign on to at standagainsthate.com, which is also part of our website. So with that, Congresswoman, I want to get back to you because I know there's a Q&A period, and we want to hear, of course, from the Oregon Law Center. Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you all for joining in today.
Thank you so much. And I want to briefly introduce our 2 panelists from the Oregon Law Center, Mike Pianoski and Catherine McNeil. Mike is a staff attorney at the Oregon Law Center, Hillsborough. He came to Oregon from Arizona for law school and didn't want to leave. I've heard that story before. Welcome. And his work at the Oregon Law Center focuses on residential tenant housing issues and foreclosure prevention. Catherine McNeil is a supervising attorney at the Oregon Law Center Hillsborough office, regional office. Her practice at OLC focuses on protecting the rights of clients with disabilities and immigrant families in the context of administrative law, employment, and education. Thank you both for joining us. I'll turn it over to you two for some opening remarks.
Thank you so much for having us here today. I just wanted to give a brief overview of our organization, the Oregon Law Center. We are a nonprofit organization that provides free legal services for low-income Oregonians. And civil services can be a broad range of services, anywhere from housing to public benefits to employment law. We do not practice criminal law, but we're here for the community and we're open. We're accepting new cases. And so I just wanted to let folks know how to reach us. Our Hillsborough Regional Office is serving the 5 most northwest counties in Oregon. So Yamhill, Washington, and Columbia out to the north coast in Tillamook and Clatsop counties. And although we are working remotely during this time, we are reachable by phone. So that general intake line that you see on your screen, you can leave us a message and request services for housing, legal services, consumer, employment. Leave us a message and we're going to do our best to return as many of those calls as we can. So our main intake line is 503-640-4115, or you can reach us toll free at the number listed. We do have a couple opportunities to reach live advocates. So if you have a family law question, on Monday and Wednesday mornings, starting at 9 a.m. until noon, you can call 503-676-5400 with your family law questions. And that's for our office and our service region. We do have a statewide public benefits hotline. So we know a lot of folks that are struggling are trying to figure out what resources are available to them. You can call the 1-800 number listed and reach an advocate to discuss questions related to public benefits, including unemployment, Medicaid, and other public benefit assistance programs. And then lastly, our OregonLawHelp.org website has a variety of self-help resources. We do have a COVID-19 specific resources page. And if you live outside of our service region, you can also find other offices that will serve your geographic area. And lastly, before we move to the formal Q&A, I was asked to just address a question that had been pre-submitted regarding resources that are available for victims of domestic violence. So we know that this is a stressful time for everyone and that folks are struggling, but especially those that are living with abuse in the home. And so we wanted to make sure that you all know resources that are available to you. The courts are still accepting the applications for protective orders during this time. So although our courts have limited hours and every county is different, so I would suggest that you reach out to your local county courthouse to find hours that they're open, but they are accepting petitions for civil restraining orders to protect against abuse. We would recommend that you call our family law hotline. We can provide advice and assistance about these legal protections that are available to you. And we also prioritize representing folks in contested restraining order hearings. So please reach out to our office if you're in that situation. I also just wanted to highlight that there is a specific public benefit. It's called TADVS, Temporary Assistance for Domestic Violence Survivors. You can contact your local DHS office to apply by phone, and that's grant funding that's available for safety-related costs that you might be facing. And then if you are looking to find a local crisis support or other resources, you can go to the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence website. That's ocadsb.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Such important information. Mike, do you want to say a few words, please?
Sure. So I focus on housing law. Oregon Law Center also does quite a bit of housing law. We have a website at OregonRentersRights.org that also has significant information related to housing. So that's a good resource. Also, there's a statewide foreclosure helpline, and the number for that is 503-227-0198. That hotline is available through June as of now. So you can call there and get some advice or refer to an attorney if you have a more complex case.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Allie, I think we're ready for questions. I know we have some.
That's right. So we'll now move on to questions for Congresswoman Bonamici, Attorney General Rosenblum, and our guests from the Oregon Law Center, Attorneys Mike Pianowski and Catherine McNeil. They'll answer a mix of questions that were submitted before the event and questions from live participants. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page. For live questions, I'll read out the screen name to let people know when it's their turn, and then I'll unmute their line. First, we'll start with a pre-submitted question. This is from Daniel in Newburgh. Daniel asks, what to do if a landlord doesn't comply with CARES Act?
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for that question. And there's a lot of provisions in CARES Act to comply with, but we absolutely want you to seek assistance if it is a housing issue or a consumer protection issue. You can certainly contact my office, and please feel free to use as a resource the wonderful advocates who are here today. If you're talking about renters' rights, housing is so important. It's a tough time for everybody. It's so important for people to keep a roof over their head. And we did provide that temporary moratorium on eviction filings, as well as other protections for tenants in federally supported or financed properties. So under the CARES Act, those protections bar landlords from issuing a notice to vacate through the end of July, and also bar charging fees, penalties, or other charges. So we would want to know if landlords are not complying with that. It does also require giving tenants at least 30 days notice before they have to vacate the property. And the Federal Housing and Finance Agency recently announced online tools. So if where you live is federally financed, and if you're protected from eviction, we'll share those tools at the end of this webinar, so you will be able to see those resources. But I know the state has also taken some critical steps to protect renters, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Catherine, who are working to protect people who are renting in these situations.
Sure. So there are several state and even some local protections for tenants in Oregon. The governor signed an executive order that limits, that prohibits landlords from terminating tenancies for non-payment or for no cause, at least through July 1st, 2020. That law does require tenants to get in touch with their landlords as soon as possible to explain to the landlord that they cannot pay the rent for a COVID-related reason. It does ask that tenants, if they're financially able to pay the rent or at least part of the rent moving forward. There are also some cities have local ordinances that also limit the landlord's ability to file eviction cases. It depends on the city you're in, so you want to talk with somebody, maybe with our office, if possible, to get specific advice on those additional protections.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Really appreciate it. And we will have contact information for my office at the end of the webinar.
That's great. Well, moving to our next question, as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page. And for live questions, I'll read out the screen name to let people know when it's their turn, and then I'll unmute their line. Our next question will be from the caller with the screen name Christopher Kirk. Christopher has a question about unemployment. And Christopher, your line has been unmuted.
Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Christopher. Yes, we can hear you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. Been unemployed since November, and then my unemployment ran out the end of March. And I am a disabled vet as well. And per my doctors, I am, because I'm asthmatic, I am not to leave my surroundings for quite a while. But with the CARE Act that was approved at the end of March, the unemployment says, keep applying your weekly employment, and I keep getting denied, and I can't get through to them. Their reader board said they're going to send out information to us to show us what we need to do to receive this, and nothing. Very frustrating.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. I hear your frustration and really appreciate that you're joining us today. And I'm sorry for what you're going through. And thank you for serving. And there should be resources to help you, absolutely. And I know I've heard from many people who have been frustrated trying to get into the unemployment system. They have been backed up, record numbers of people applying, but that's no excuse. So certainly we would look forward to helping you navigate that system. Also, you should be getting the direct payment if you haven't already. That should be something that would help you out. But if you're entitled to get unemployment and can't get into the system, I sense your frustration. I know you're not alone in trying to get through. The federal act, the CARES Act, did expand access to different categories of people who traditionally would not have been eligible for unemployment in the pandemic unemployment part of the legislation. That got implemented a little bit later than the rest of the unemployment. So I do know that the state is hiring more claims processors. So hopefully you will be able to soon see the benefits that you deserve. But I would look forward to hearing from you so my constituent caseworkers can help you navigate. And I don't know if the Attorney General or the Oregon Law Center want to weigh in as well. But Christopher, we really want to be there to help you. And I'm sorry you're frustrated, but we'll try to do everything we can, especially because of your health conditions. You need to stay home and stay safe. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This is Ellen Rosenblum, and Christopher, I also really want to support you in making sure that you get through. One thing that this isn't going to necessarily help, but the system is a very antiquated one, and it turns out that not only are they now adding a lot of new people to help, since unemployment was so low before, they didn't have the support that suddenly was needed for the influx of applicants like yourselves, due to no fault of your own, of course. But the other side of that is that they can't just get them onboarded immediately, because they need to be trained in a system that is actually a 30-year-old COBOL DOS type of system. So again, apologies for what you're going through, but they really are working very, very hard, bringing people in even from other agencies who weren't maybe needed by, say, the lottery or some other area of state government where there's less need right now. So there's lots going on, and we really hope that we'll be able to help you. And thank you, Congresswoman, for offering to personally follow Christopher's situation.
We will be doing that. Thank you. Thanks, Christopher. Take care.
I would just briefly add, Representative, if I may.
Of course.
We heard that the Oregon Employment Department is encouraging folks that are having trouble getting through to go to their local WorkSource office. And so that might be another way you can, try to get some assistance if you feel like your claim should be going through. And I also, if folks that are getting denials that they disagree with, definitely reach out to our public benefits hotline. We can offer advice, give folks guidance on how to appeal and navigate that system as well.
That's terrific. Thank you for adding that, Catherine. And there are our 3 workforce offices within the 1st Congressional District. So Christopher, we're more than happy to connect you with them as well to see if you can get some help there. Good suggestion. Thanks, Catherine.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page. For live questions, I'll read out the screen name to let people know when it's their turn. Our next question was submitted in advance by Haley in Tigard. Haley wants to know, how do I fight fraudulent high interest loans?
Haley, thank you so much for that question. That's something that I've been concerned about for years. When I was in Salem, then Speaker of the House, now Senator Merkley, and I worked on really reining in the payday loan industry. People who need help should not be taken advantage of. So if you have a particular situation where you feel like a expensive high interest loan is really inappropriate, please seek assistance. either from the Oregon Law Center, we can start, or the Attorney General can take a look at that. You absolutely should not be taken advantage of during these times. There are federal laws like the Truth in Lending Act and consumer protections at the state level that could help you as well. So we'd want to get the specifics of the situation, but please know that that the payday lenders, the unscrupulous people who are out there trying to take advantage, we can't let them get away with it. Oftentimes with something like a payday loan, just traps people in a cycle of debt. So we want to be able to help you and can get in touch. There will be contact information for my office, but don't hesitate to contact us and let us take a look at it, or the Oregon Law Center. And I'm going to let maybe Mike and Catherine go first, and then Attorney General Rosenblum, I know you're fighting these unscrupulous lenders as well.
So as far as the Oregon Law Center goes, we don't do very much actual consumer law. So this may be outside of the thing that we'd be able to help with, but I would encourage people to contact us to talk with an intake staff and see if it's something we could help with.
And that's pretty much the same with us. I want to use this opportunity to give you our consumer hotline, and it would be great if you would call us at this number and we can review. First of all, we can sort of help make a determination whether we believe it is in fact a fraudulent high interest loan. It may, unfortunately, just be a high interest loan, which in and of itself is not necessarily a good thing, but it may or may not be something that is a violation, as the Congresswoman said, of perhaps the Truth in Lending law, our payday loans with laws, which thanks to the Congresswoman when she was a senator, she helped to get passed. So here's the number of our general consumer hotline. We actually now have 3 different hotlines, but this is the one I'm going to give you. It's 877-877. So that's twice, 877-877-9392. And if you prefer to contact us online, it's just oregonconsumer.gov, and you can place a written complaint or an online complaint with us, and we'll get back to you right away. But if you call that number during work hours, we do have a live person, one of our very well-trained volunteers, who will answer your question and or refer it if we can't answer it right away.
Well, thank you to the Attorney General, and thanks, Haley. And I just want to note that one of the reasons why I support ongoing direct payments during the pandemic is because it's a really hard time for people. And I know that there are people out there trying to take advantage of people during these, consumers during these tough times. You shouldn't have to turn to an unscrupulous lender. We should be able to get you through these hard times. And I hope we can extend those payments during the pandemic to help people out so that they don't need to turn to expensive loans. So ready for another question, Allie?
Yes, and we'll take a live question now. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page. For live questions, I'll read out the screen name to let people know it's their turn, and then I'll unmute their line. Our next question will be from the caller with the screen name Penny Okamoto. Penny, your line has been unmuted.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Penny.
Hello. My thanks to everyone who's taking part in this today. I'm very grateful. My question is really more directed for Ms. McNeil. Can your organization help people file an extreme risk protection order? My organization, Cease by Oregon, has been seeing a sharp increase in firearm background checks, which leads us to believe we're going to have a sharp increase in gun sales and a subsequent increase in domestic violence and suicide, as well as unintentional shooting. So can your organization help people file extreme risk protection orders, or do you recommend that they ask someone else for that assistance? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So our practice is primarily focused on restraining orders under the Family Abuse Prevention Act, and some of the other protections for folks, elderly folks, and people with disabilities, those types of restraining orders. So I'm not aware that our organization has assisted someone in filing an extreme risk protection order. However, if folks are feeling unsafe and they want to call our family law hotline, they are welcome to do so.
Please also feel free to call our consumer line that I gave you earlier, and we'll be happy to refer you to the appropriate place to obtain an extreme risk protection order. It is a very important law. It's still relatively new. Not that many people are aware of their ability, if they live with someone or a family member to someone who they believe is a danger to themselves or others, and they have access to a weapon, it is a very good alternative to having to get an actual restraining order. It's a different type of restraining order, requiring different and maybe perhaps easier criteria in order to obtain it. So I strongly encourage it. It is saving lives, and it is something that the law enforcement can also assist you with. You could contact any law enforcement office, and they also have the right to, along with family members, file for an ERPO, an extreme risk protection order. So please do that as quickly as you can if you have a sense that there's an imminent risk of harm.
Thank you, Attorney General, and thank you, Penny. I think it's a reminder, as we heard earlier, that we're supposed to be staying home, but home isn't safe for everyone. And so we want to make sure that those who feel like, if you feel like you're not safe, please know you're not alone. Don't hesitate to reach out. We do have those extreme risk protection orders in Oregon, thanks in part to the advocacy of organizations like Ceasefire Oregon. They're designed to keep people safe in those dangerous situations. And we know, as Catherine McNeil spoke earlier, of the concerns about domestic violence. If you're not safe at home, please reach out for help. You're not alone. We want to help you. Are we ready for another question, Allie?
We are. As a reminder, just use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page if you'd like to ask a question. Our next question will be live from the caller with the screen name Steve's S8. Steve has a question about reduced hours. And Steve, your line has been unmuted.
Hi, Steve. Waiting to hear from Steve. I still see his microphone not unmuted yet. We're working on it, Steve. How are we doing with Steve? We're going to wait just a minute. We have a lot of people on this call, which is a good sign. That people are reaching out, but we're waiting to hear from Steve.
Let's give him just a minute. And if we're having some technical difficulties, we can always come back to Steve. There he is.
Hi, Steve.
Sorry that
took a minute.
My company has reduced our hours to about 30 hours a week. And so that's kind of given me a hardship. And I was wondering if I qualified for any kind of financial assistance.
Well, I strongly encourage you to check with the employment office, even though it's hard to get through sometimes. We do have a program called Workshare in Oregon, where people who are working reduced hours, it's a kind of an agreement between the employer and the employment department to have proportional unemployment for people who have their hours reduced. So that is a possibility depending on your circumstance. And we'd be happy to help you look into that. And I don't know if the Oregon Law Center folks have any thoughts on that in terms of helping somebody whose hours have been reduced. And also, Steve, there were the direct payments that went out. I don't know if you were able to receive a direct payment. Those were for people who
Have not yet.
Not yet. You've not yet received it?
No.
Okay, that's been a long time. So we'll encourage you to I know there's a site where you can look to see what the status is. Many of those were directly deposited if you filed a 2018 or 2019 tax return and had direct deposit information on there. If you did not have the direct deposit information on your 2018 or 2019 tax return, there's a portal where you could enter it. Otherwise, there's a portal where you can enter your address, and assuming you qualify for a check, they can mail it to you. But I know that's it seems like a long process to get that check. So I look forward to.
Last time I Sorry, but the last time I checked, there was no information for us, me or my wife.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, this is someplace where we can, we have constituent caseworkers who can help you look into that as well, because if you qualify for that direct payment, you should have received it by now, unless for some reason you did not give them any of that information about where
Yeah,
to send it or how to deposit. So we'll,
unfortunately, we owed federal last 2 years.
okay,
So
well,
we didn't
we're,
have any direct deposit
I
information.
need to, okay. And did you enter into the portal your information so they could direct deposit your payment?
There was no link provided when we
goodness.
went to the website because
Okay.
they didn't have any information about us to update us on any kind of status. So there was no link for me to give them any direct deposit information.
Okay, well, that's frustrating. I'm sorry that's happening. We're more than happy to help you walk through that process, because those payments were designed to help people like you whose hours were reduced. And I don't know if either Catherine or Mike or the Attorney General want to weigh in on Workshare or possibilities of someone whose hours have been reduced. And Steve, we will have contact information for my office at the end on the screen. Is that right, Allie? Is that the best way to get it? The contact information.
We can either follow up with Steve directly or share that through the chat. Yes.
Terrific. Okay, thank you.
Great. So next we'll go to a pre-submitted question. Several callers have asked questions about protections for renters. Antoinette in Hillsborough asks, is there any help available for those that can't make rent payments during this crisis without being penalized or thrown out? What recourse do folks have?
Well, thank you, Antoinette. I know there are so many questions about that because housing is so fundamental. And I know that there were protections passed both at the state and federal level. The CARES Act provided a temporary moratorium on eviction filings as well as other protections for tenants in federally supported or financed properties. It's my understanding that the state provisions can help fill the gap if it's not a federally supported or financed property, but landlords cannot issue notices to vacate through the end of July or charge fees or penalties for non-payment of rent. Also requires landlords to provide at least a 30-day notice before vacating in most cases. So again, we're going to have tools if you are in a property that is federally housed, if it's part of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. So again, you shouldn't have to worry about this right now. There's so many other things going on. Not being able to pay your rent should not be one of those worries. One of the things I do want to mention is that I'm working on getting into the next piece of legislation or passing a bill to make sure that people's credit ratings are not affected by non-payment of bills during this time, particularly at a time when people can't work if they have healthcare bills or other consumer bills. Their credit should not be harmed because of their inability to pay because they can't work. So we're working on that to make sure that credit reports are protected as well, and to make sure that accounts are free from garnishment, particularly as those limited federal not be grabbed by creditors. The youth will need those resources to help them get through these challenging times. So I'm going to let Catherine and Mike and the Attorney General weigh in on the state protection.
Sure. So the state executive order, again, lasts through July 1st, 2020. A landlord cannot evict a tenant for non-payment with financial problems related to COVID. So again, you should contact your landlord if you're not able to pay the rent to inform them that you can't pay the rent and that it's due to a COVID financial problem. You're safe you're safe from eviction at least through July 1st. And if you're in a federally covered property that the CARES Act applies to, you've got even a little longer than that for sure. This stuff is changing almost day by day, so we're not sure whether there's going to be additional time on the end of that. But for now, you're protected. You can't be evicted. You're safe in your home. So I hope that helps.
One of the things I want to add to, there's a piece of legislation called the Emergency Rental Assistance and Market Stability Act that I'm supporting. And that's to help families and individuals stay in their homes during this challenging time. It's $100 billion. It's a national bill, so that goes across the whole country to help people pay for their rent and their utility bills. But importantly, it also supports rental property owners, because we've heard from, for example, if somebody owns a home that's divided into 4 apartments and they have 3 tenants who aren't paying their bills, then everyone is strapped because there's no resources to pay that underlying mortgage, and that affects the tenants as well as the rental property owner. So this is a sort of comprehensive, holistic approach to make sure that people can stay in their homes and get through this hard time. Thank you again, Antoinette.
And just a reminder to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom page if you'd like to ask a question. Next, we have a pre-submitted question from Phyllis and Gresham. Phyllis wants to know if there are any suggestions for resources or hotlines to prevent, reduce, report predatory fraud or theft attempts during the pandemic.
Sounds like a perfect question for the Attorney General.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, thank you for that question, and it's a good general one. So a reminder that we do have our regular consumer hotline. We receive thousands of calls a year, and we have volunteers who respond to the calls. A little bit lighter crew right now with COVID. Usually they're right there at our Salem office, but I know that we are still trying to answer all the calls. It's 877-877-9392. That's the phone number. And then if you want to go online, it's oregonconsumer.gov. Now we also have a price gouging hotline that's specific to price gouging, but the other number will also work fine for that. So I don't want to really load you up with numbers. So the only other number I'm going to give you today is our bias and hate crimes number. You didn't ask about that, but I haven't had the chance. If it's okay, Congresswoman, I want everybody to know about this, because anybody who feels that they've been targeted based on how they look, what their religion, what anything unique to them, even if it isn't a crime, even if you don't want to report it to the district attorney, please let us know. We're keeping track of these, and we're also referring everyone to needed resources, whatever you need. It's very personalized, and again, it's a live person to talk to. We have an amazing civil rights staff who will help you, and that number is 844-924-BIAS, BIAS. So of course that ties to the numbers. So thank you for giving me the chance to let you know about that. As I said, unfortunately at this time, the scammers are out, and so unfortunately are some really mean-spirited individuals. Mostly people are good though, thank goodness.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. It would be helpful to also let your representative and senators know when we see these types of bad, unscrupulous businesses or individuals taking advantage, particularly during a pandemic, but at any time, then we can examine federal legislation to determine if there's a pattern or if there's gaps in existing legislation. Does this already violate a federal law? And if not, how can we fix it to make sure that people are not being taken advantage of? So I encourage you to share those stories. They do make a difference, and when we can detect patterns of places where we need to fill the gaps in existing laws or increase enforcement. So thank you so much for participating.
And we work very closely with the Federal Trade Commission. They do a great job on detecting scams and frauds. And there's also some phone numbers that are very readily available and email addresses for you.
We'll go to a pre-submitted question next. This question is about SNAP benefits and childcare. Amy in Portland wants to know, are there financial resources beyond expanded SNAP benefits for parents needing to return to work but without childcare?
Amy, thank you so much for that question. It's something that I've been working on. I was working on even before the pandemic, because here in Oregon, Every county is a childcare desert, meaning there's one spot for every 3 children, and childcare is very expensive. It can cost as much as college. And that doesn't work for working families. Plus we have the concern of people who are working in childcare. Oftentimes those early childhood educators and people taking care of our kids, the next generation, are often paid poverty wages themselves and qualify for public benefits. So it really is a problem that requires a structural change. And it's something that I'm working on, particularly with Senators Merkley and Wyden, and with my colleague from Massachusetts, Catherine Clark. We have a proposal to make a significant investment to make sure that the childcare centers can stay open and that the families can afford childcare. We did include some additional funding for childcare development block grants, but it wasn't enough. And we know that the one-time direct payment isn't enough to help families. Many of the childcare centers have closed. There's some that are open around, for example, hospitals or healthcare centers. But if we cannot make these structural changes to fix the system, we won't be able to open up our economy. If it's time for people to go back to work and they don't have a safe place for their kids, and we won't be able to open up if the childcare centers are open, but the families can't afford to have their kids go there. So this is, again, one of these inequities that existed, but has been highlighted by the pandemic. We need to update our workplace policies to make them work for working families, and a big structural change to our childcare systems so that our kids are safe and our people can go to work, our parents can go to work without the stress of not knowing how their kids will be. We need to address that, and it's something I'm making a top priority going forward. So Amy, thank you so much for that question. I hope things work out for you and your family. It's just so important that we recognize the investment that we need to make in our children. That's true with early childhood education and education. This is a good investment for our future. So thank you again.
I think we have time for one more question. We'll take a live question from Tyler McInnes about eviction prevention. Taylor, you're live on the line. Might just take us a minute here to queue that one up.
Tyler, we're working on unmuting you so you can ask your question.
There, so I can read this question out. It's from Tyler McInnes. Tyler says, eviction prevention measures locally are critical and helping keep people housed for the time being, but folks are accruing debt the longer this pandemic lasts and will need to repay those in full just months after the pandemic is over. Will future relief packages include resources for states to help? And I think we have Tyler now, so let's see if we can.
I can see there. Okay, yeah. Tyler, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I think Ali covered it. So my question is, will future relief packages include resources for states to help renters and homeowners who are accruing debt right now, unable to make those payments, help them pay those debts when the time comes?
That's a great question, Tyler. And I know a short-term benefit is not going to be enough if people have to pay accrued rent going forward. And that's why I support continuing the direct payments to individuals and increasing them during the pandemic, making sure that people have access to those direct payments and to unemployment. And it's one of the reasons why we boosted unemployment benefits $600 a week, to make sure that issues like this don't arise. But it also speaks to the need for the big investments in housing. We know housing is already expensive here in Oregon, and you know, it's particularly in the metro area, it's been a real challenge. So we need more investments in housing. We need more affordable housing, and going forward to the future. All of these is yet another area where the pandemic has highlighted issues that existed with the cost of housing. We are working on making sure that we get more aid to state and local governments. And that's really important because of revenue shortfalls that we will see at the state level and the local level. as a former state legislator. I was in Salem in 2009, and I know how challenging it was then after the recession. And it's going to be challenging going forward because the state is not collecting revenue. As you know, we're an income tax-based state. So the aid that we can direct to state and local governments is going to be critical. There has been some, but it hasn't gone as much to the local governments as it needs to, but it also hasn't been enough. We need to be able to help fill some of the revenue shortfalls. Otherwise, we're going to see significant cuts to programs that really matter in our communities, from education to public safety and all the safety net programs. So, and I know there was a mention of SNAP earlier. One of the things that I'm working on as well is making sure that we have SNAP benefits for people who are qualified, and making sure that people are not struggling with food insecurity during the pandemic and beyond. I had a piece of legislation put into the CARES Act so that schools could continue to serve meals even off-site. And some of those school districts are actually delivering meals to students. There are many children in our communities who get their most nutritious meal at school. And so that program is working to make sure students get food. But you raised a great point, Tyler, that we need to have long-term solutions as well as short-term solutions. And I'll ask the Attorney General or the Oregon Law Center representatives if they would like to add anything to that.
I think you've put it very well, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. Of course, your point is well taken that the state is already looking at potential budget cuts. And so whatever, I join our caller in inviting the federal government to please send some additional funds our way so that we can continue to provide these services.
Well, and thank you, Attorney General Rosenblum. It highlights also the importance of the investments that we do make. Many of you know I work a lot on education issues, and the federal role in education is really about equity. I'm honored to chair the Civil Rights and Human Services Subcommittee and the Education Committee, and know how important it is, for example, the child nutrition programs, Title I, funding for schools that have high populations of low-income students, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's never been fully funded, and it's never been more important. And to make sure that funding is there so all of our students have the education they need and deserve. Federal student aid, college affordability is a challenge for too many. I myself worked my way through first 2 years of community college and 2 years of college and 3 years of law school with a manageable amount of student debt. And we're not hearing that now. If we don't invest in bills like the College Affordability Act to make sure everyone has those doors of opportunity open, we're going to see more disparities. So it highlights the need for the investments that we make at the federal level in our communities, whether they be SNAP, school nutrition, higher ed, early childhood. All of those are more important, and I will continue to advocate for those programs to help to close the gaps, with the understanding that they're even more important than ever. Ali, have we reached close to the end of time?
We are. So I'd like to give our panelists a chance to make a few closing comments, starting with the Oregon Law Center, then the Attorney General, and then the Congresswoman.
Thank you again for having us. We know low-income families in Oregon are really struggling right now. And so again, please feel free to reach out to the Oregon Law Center, call our office, and we will do our best to try to assist you with any civil legal needs that you may have during this time.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, and the Oregon Law Center for having me on this panel today. You know, together we can make a huge difference, and all of you who are participating, we know that it's a struggle, and we want to be there to help you to, because we're all in this together, even though we're in little boxes today on the screen. And finally, I wanted to invite you. I'll be co-hosting a teletown hall. It's by phone, focusing on scams and frauds next Tuesday. So if you have some more specific questions, it will also be a Q&A. I will be co-hosting with our United States Attorney, Billy Williams, and with a new nonprofit called the Oregon Consumer Justice. It will be on Tuesday at 10 a.m. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to give that phone number so people can jot it down and join us. It's 855-756-7520, and it's extension 60478 hashtag. Thanks so much again for allowing me to be a part of this important discussion.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Allie, for moderating the discussion. I wish we had more time to answer everybody's questions, but please know that my office, the Attorney General, and the Oregon Law Center will all be ongoing resources as we navigate the crisis together. If you or someone you know needs help with a federal agency, please contact my office. You can reach me at 503-469-6010 or send an email through my website. Even though my staff is working remotely, they're constantly checking the messages and voicemails, and they're available to help. Thank you again to our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, for joining us today and for your work. And especially thank you so much to Mike and Catherine for being here on behalf of the Oregon Law Center and for all you do to help Oregonians. Thank you everyone again for being here. Please stay safe and please keep in touch and know that you're not alone. If you need help, please reach out and we're here to help. Thank you so much. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.